Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are so very grateful for this morning, for the things that you have shown us from your word, and for your mercy and grace and love towards us and towards all that you have created. And we just pray, Lord, that in studying your word, we can come to know you more closely, that we can approach you, that we can see the sins in our lives, the things that need to change, that are unlike Christ. And we just ask for his presence through thy Spirit here as we open your word together. We ask to be taught of you and that you can encourage each person searching for truth. Be with us now, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning again. So just before we started, Stephen had asked a question about the article. It's January 20, is it 24th, 1864? Or is it 26th? I can't remember. What's the date of the article?
I think it's the 26th.
The 26th? Yeah, because I kind of always thought it was like 126. But so it's the article where I believe that Uriah Smith wrote, because he's the editor of the review at the time, because James White is basically taking a break because of the death of their son Henry, and he's traveling with Sister White. So, I mean, it is possible that he wrote the article and it's written in a different style than he normally writes and uses vocabulary he doesn't normally use, but it's not very likely. So it's most likely that because it's unsigned and Uriah Smith is actually the editor, that he wrote the article. They don't change his name on the masthead just because, he's just temporarily the editor and he's just a young guy. So, so he's not listed as the editor at that time, but he actually is editing the review. So it's most likely Uriah Smith wrote that article. It's not a huge thing. There is the book that James White wrote in, you said 1876 on Miller?
I think it's 75.
75, okay. And in that book, he, in one of the footnotes, he definitely appears to be endorsing Miller's understanding of Leviticus 26 of the 7 times. So there isn't a great deal of evidence that James White ever personally rejected that understanding, just that one article. And it's more consistent with Uriah Smith. One is he quotes Gesenius, and it's consistent with what Uriah Smith put in one of his footnotes, I guess, in Daniel and Revelation on Leviticus 26, where he's dealing with the age to come people, which later developed into Jehovah's Witnesses through a series of stages, because Barber is going to be a part of that age to come movement. And then Charles Taze Russell is going to be a follower of Barber. And so that's kind of, and they use the 2520, but quite differently. They don't use it from Leviticus 26. They use it from Daniel chapter 4. So anyway, that was just something we were talking about before we started this study, which I thought I should maybe mention. Now, before that, Aran and I were addressing some math, and so I'm going to look at that first, sort of a little bit out of context of what we're studying, but going through these verses of Daniel chapter 11, before we get to verse 40, when it's describing the papal power, it's going to talk about dividing the land for gain. So in Daniel 11, verse 39, it says, thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Now, when I see, words like divide, I think of them mathematically. And so I thought, well, maybe this phrase here, and I don't think it's super significant things that we found, but I just want to get it here in the record so that that I remember it. I'm not going to forget about it. So when we look at divide the land for gain and we do the gematria of that, so just the straight English, it's going to be 187. So that's kind of a clue that we can also pay attention to that phrase. Do people agree that divide the land for gain, since it adds up, the gematria adds up to 187? That's a clue that it means something. Okay, I'll just show you the gematria here. Here is divide the land for gain. You can see the normal sum. It equals 187. So that's symbol of July 18th. So just for that reason, we can say, well, maybe we should be looking here to see some clue of how this relates to things. Now, also we have the Hebrew numbers. So the Hebrew numbers can obviously mean things. So I added them all together, 2505 for divide, 127 for land, and 4242 for gain. And I came up with the number 6,700 and what's the number? I'm just gonna do it again so people can see it. So take 2505, that's divide, plus 127, and then I add the 4242, that's the word gain, and I get 6874. And that is, if we counted from September 11th, 2001, that's going to bring us to July 7th, 2020. It's going to be 11 days short of 6885, which is the number of days from September 11th to July 18, 2020. So it brings us to July 7th. So now, as far as 11 as a symbol, we do have 11 as a symbol, but I'm not sure that this is very significant. It's just what I did, right? So I did that math and I try to say, well, okay, that's kind of interesting. It's close. It's 11 days off. Another thing that I did was I took gain 4242 and I divided it by land. 127, I believe this, and then I get 33.4. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So I look at that and I say, well, is that years, right? Because it could represent 33.4 years. And so I just multiplied it by 365.25, and you get, basically it's 12,200, right? So 12200 or 12,200 days. And so, I looked at how that would relate to our lines. So, if I go to November 9th, so go here, change this. So if I go to November 9th, 1989, and I count 12,200 days, it's going to bring me to April 5th, 2023. Now, April 5th, 2023 is Passover. It's also that April 5th, 2030 date. So that's 7 years prior to that April 5th, 2030 date on the Gregorian calendar. So I thought that was rather interesting. So it gives us that date. I don't know of anything significant about April 5th, 2023, as far as what happened. That was last year, of course. But the fact that it's the Passover date, I thought interesting. And then I looked at 31 AD. So on the Passover in 31 AD, which is going to be there in the Julian April 27th, that's going to be when Jesus is crucified. So I just counted back 12,200 days from there. Go minus, oops, minus. And so if I go back, it's going to bring me to December 1st, 4 BC. And the date there is, on the biblical calendar, is 9/11. Right. Now that's going to be traditionally, for people who believe that Jesus was not born on Christmas Day, we often put the Feast of Tabernacles as the day that Jesus was born in 4 BC, because he tabernacles with men, and that's going to be the 15th of Tishri, and that's just 8 weeks. So if we added the 8 weeks to that 12,200 days, it'd be 12,256 days between the birth of Christ, if that's when he's born. We don't know the exact date, but that's often a guess people make, to his crucifixion. So just some interesting little details. Whether they mean anything, I don't know. But where I do find some stuff that's rather interesting has to do with looking at this phrase itself, regarding dividing the land. So I'm going to go here. Any thoughts on any of that math? No thoughts on it? Okay. So what I did is I looked up the word divide land. So here in my search engine. Okay. And so some of these phrases here, well, Numbers 33:54, and ye shall divide the land by lot for an inheritance among your families. So obviously we know they divide the land. And we have this word lot, 1486. And I can't remember what we did with this word before. I think there was some significance in that number. Just can't remember what it was. Okay, but anyway, because I know 1461 is exactly 4 Gregorian years, and so I can't remember what there was about that. But anyway, so they divide the land, and we know that it's going to be Eliezer and Joshua that are going to be involved in that. They're going to have one prince from every tribe to divide the land by inheritance. The Numbers 34:18. So it's about dividing this inheritance. Now, so we got that in Joshua 1:6. Be strong and of a good courage, for this people shall divide for an inheritance the land. And then in chapter 13:7, it says, now therefore divide this land for an inheritance unto the 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh. So we know, why is there 9 tribes and the half tribe of Manasseh? What land's being divided there? Right, so this is going to be the land on the west side of the Jordan that's going to be divided that way, right? Okay. And And divide the seed, divide the land by inheritance. It's going to be talked about in Ezekiel as well, in chapter 45. And chapter 47, ye shall divide this land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. And then, of course, we have it in Daniel 11, verse 39. But here it's going to be dividing the land for gain. So it's not dividing it for an inheritance. And so this is referring not to God's people dividing the land, but this is the papacy dividing the land for gain. So what would that mean symbolically if we put this in the context of this? The land is normally divided for an inheritance, and now it's going to be divided for gain.
In other words, instead of treating this as a gift from God, they treated it as something where they were going to be able to profit from it and choose greed over worship.
Right. So it's part of the counterfeit. There is a dividing of the land, but it's not for good purposes. It's the papacy is a counterfeit, right? So instead of an inheritance from God, they're seeking gain. Okay. Now there was another interesting part of this in Joshua that I don't think it's here. So in Joshua chapter 18, so it says, the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of the congregation there. And the land was subdued before them. And there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes, which had not yet received their inheritance. And Joshua said unto the children of Israel, how long are ye slack to go to possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers hath given you? Give out from among you 3 men for each tribe, and I will send them, and they shall rise and go through the land and describe it according to the inheritance of them. They shall come again to me. So what is describing referring to? I mean, we use it in English in a more modern sense. But what does describe mean? What are they doing?
Survey. Would it be surveying?
Yeah, they're going to just survey the land, right? So they're going to note the landmarks. I mean, it doesn't mean they get out there with one of those, I can't remember what it's called, a transit.
Spy out the land.
Yeah, but yeah, so they're going to mark off the borders, and they're going to come back and say that, okay, this is the land we want. And it says, and they shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall abide in their coast in the south, and the house of Joseph shall abide in their coast in the north. So Joseph, of course, being Ephraim, right? It's just another name for Ephraim. Ephraim, the son of Joseph. So you got Judah in the south, that's the southern kingdom, and Ephraim in the north. Ye shall therefore describe the land into 7 parts, and bring the description hither to me, that I may cast lots for you there before the Lord our God. But the Levites have no part among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their inheritance. And Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan on the east, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. Okay, so we got the 7 parts. So what's being described here? My understanding here is that there's actually 9 tribes that are on the east side or the west side of the Jordan, including the half tribe of Manasseh. So you have a half tribe of Manasseh on the west side, along with Gad and Reuben, and then you have another half tribe on the west side with 9 other tribes. One of those is Joseph, and
You mean the east side?
yeah,
Alright.
the west side is where you have 9 tribes. So on the east side you have Gad and Reuben, and a half tribe of Manasseh, and then you have a half tribe of Manasseh on the west side, right, along with 9 other tribes, 2 of which are Ephraim and Judah, right, Joseph and Judah. And that means there's 7 tribes that had not actually received their inheritance. Is that sort of what's being said here? That's why I take it that there's 7 parts. That those are so we sort of have Ephraim and Judah figured out. I don't know if anybody knows this really well. Okay, so anyway, they're going to describe the land, and then they're going to divide it, right? So they divide it into 7 parts, then they describe it. So it says they're going to divide it into 7 parts. But first they have to describe it, that is to mark it out. And the Levites are not going to have any of this land. So the Levites are going to be not counted in this, right? So we can see we got 12 tribes if we don't count the Levites. Otherwise we have 13, because the half tribe of Manasseh, right, that's Manasseh and Ephraim that make up Joseph, but half of Manasseh is on the east and half is on the west of the Jordan. Okay. Now, what about the numbers of these verses when it talks about the Levites have no part among you for the priesthood of the Lord? It is their inheritance. This is in Joshua 18, verse 7. So we have again in this addressing the Levites, the verse that addresses the Levites in this dividing of the land, we have the symbol of July 18th, just as we did with the phrase, divide the land for gain in Daniel 11, verse 39. So if they're dividing the land for gain, that is the papacy, they are a counterfeit of the priesthood that we have with the Levites. Does that make sense to people? Or am I skipping steps here in logic? Now we also have the symbol of 7 parts. So what's the symbol of 7 parts? Why is that important? You know, you can have the word Shiva, right, which is the word from Leviticus 26 that deals with the 7 times. And then the word parts is just another form of the word divide. So we're going to describe the land into 7 divisions, right? Because 2505 is the word that's translated as divide, and then they translate this word as portion or part. And one's chalek, the other one's chalek. Right, so chalek, just different vowels, right? They don't sound too much different, chalek and chalek. Okay, so it is describing the division of the land into parts. So it's dividing the land into 7 parts. So what symbols could we attach here? We got the 7 times. We have this connection to Daniel 11, verse 39 as a counterfeit of this. Anything more? Okay, so there's some things to think about. Um, and some numbers and symbols that we might be able to employ,
Yeah.
especially.
Well, you got the 7 and the 3, which would make 10, but that's the, I mean, I don't know what that'd mean, but
Well, yeah, well, you got 7, 3, and then you have 2. So it's 12. And then you have the Levites, that's 13. It's just counting the tribes. But yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, we have symbols there. Um, and 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 I think once we get into the present truth application of that, I think we'll find more significance in these numbers as they relate to the periods of time. So anyway, I just wanted to look at that just because I was looking at it earlier. So anyway, going back to Daniel chapter 11. So we now can see that there's more of a flow as we move through these verses, that the purpose of all of this is to lead us to the man of sin, right? To show us the papal power. And if we think about the beginning of Daniel chapter 10, where we have the matter and the vision. So he understands the matter, he knows and understands the vision of the evenings and mornings, right? So he knows the 2300 days, and he understands the 70 weeks. And we can say that definitely those two prophecies are the subject of Daniel chapter 11. First, we need to have Rome in order to crucify Christ, and then we need the papacy at the end. That is the things that are happening in that history in connection with pagan Rome are going to, with the destruction of Jerusalem and all those different things that happen, are going to be a type of what's going to happen at the end of the world. And the papacy is going to be at the end of the world. It's going to be at the end of the 1260 when the time of the end happens. But it's also going to be revived and involved in what happens in the very final events. So we have these 2 times of the end, the appointed times, and the times of the end, connecting us with not just Millerite history, but with our history. So it's a very unique view of Daniel 11 that I've never seen before. And we came to it just through following these studies in detail and seeing what God had revealed to us about them. Okay, so so how we've been studying, I think, is the key to understanding those ideas. That if we hadn't studied this way, we never would have seen what we see, and I believe it to be true. I believe that's what's coming from the study of God's word. So, so we have that time appointed, the time of the end, for yet it is at a time appointed. And we had this, that they're going to try them, purge them, make them white. We know that this is going to be quoted in Daniel 12, right? So it's basically just in a different order. Many shall be purified and made white and tried. So instead of tried first, it's going to be listed last. And that's going to be addressing, we believe, the Millerite history. And so we discussed a little bit about that yesterday, that it's actually pointing to the end of the 1260 years, the end of the 1290, and the 1335, right, in verse 12. That is that period from the time of the end to the end of the prophetic periods. Okay. So the opening up of the book of Daniel is being talked about there. So I'm not sure where to go from here. Any thoughts on any of that? I mean, we have the fall of Rome. We have how this is all typical. We have the rise of the papacy, and that's where we're going to get to the end there in verse 40. So the time appointed, right? It's going to describe the papacy from 36 to 39, and then it's going to show us both of those times of the end, 1798 and 1989. So any thoughts on that? No one has any comments on it? Now, Stephen, did you watch the study from yesterday? Because you weren't here yesterday, right?
Yes.
So do you agree with that idea of how we're looking at this progression? What I just described, does that make sense to you?
I have to sort of go over it. Keep going over it. I don't know. Maybe see it more. Time goes on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, every time I go over it, it makes more sense. But we can see, the main idea here is that we know that there's the 1260. That's obviously being, the time of papal supremacy is being addressed. And then because we're going to start with that transition, so we're going to have 508 and we're going to have 538. Both of those are going to be addressed, right? Because in verse 31, arms shall stand on his part. We put that as 508. And then the taking away of the daily and the placing of the abomination that make it desolate, that's from 508 to 538. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, that they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days. So this is the period in which God's people are being persecuted, the 1260 days. But when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help. So we looked at Revelation chapter 12. There's this flood that goes after the woman, and the little help is the United States, right? And the United States arises when, according to Ellen White in The Great Controversy? When does this power, the two-horn power of Revelation 13, arise? Right? We know it's there.
1798.
Yeah, 1798. So we know it's there before, during this persecution. But it's specifically in 1798 that it becomes this power, right? This two-horned beast. Okay. So then it's going to go back. So, it's going to talk about the time of the end. So the time of the end has to be 1798. For it is yet for a time appointed, right? So that to me is 1798 to 1844. And some of them of understanding shall fall, and try them and purge them and make them white. So again, that refers us back to the 1290 and the 1335 in Daniel 12. Even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. Okay. So we can see that that's the time of the end. Okay. So we're saying that this trying, purging, making white is the three angels' messages. So that means, and we looked at that word to the time of the end, and the preposition there can mean at the time of the end. Right? So it's just, so I'm saying it's at the time of the end that you have this message, this three-step testing prophetic message. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting here, so notice this word try. But what do you notice about this Hebrew number? Six, 8, 8, 4.
Well, 6,885 is the number of days from September 11th to, is it July 18th?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So this is very close, right? Now this word try, if we took 6,885, it's actually just now used as a noun, and it refers to a goldsmith in Nehemiah 3:31. And after him repaired Malchi the goldsmith's son unto the place of the Nethinims and of the merchants over against the gate Mifkad, and to the going up of the corner. So we can see it's related to 6,885 because that's just the noun form of the word try. Trying is a verb. Obviously, goldsmith is not a verb. I mean, he's a person that tries things, that purifies them, right? If we look up this word, we can see that it is actually refers, and it can refer to a goldsmith as well. It's the idea of refining something, right? Purging is to remove, here, I should go over here, purifying something, right? Making it bright, testing or proving it, so they're related. And then making white, 3:8-3:5, has to do with making something bright. So it's just something that's pure, right? So we understand that word. So it's the purifying or the making white of gold or character. And so we can see how this relates to the three-step testing message. And we can relate it, of course, the message to the Laodiceans as well. Some similarities there. Okay. So I think it's kind of interesting with the word try. It would be the number of days between from the end of September 11th, 2001 to the start of July 18, 2020, if we wanted to look at it that way. Okay, now, so it goes back then in verse 36. The idea that I see here is it's going to talk about this period, and then it's going to go back and address the papacy in more detail. It's going to introduce the Pope as a person, right? So we have papal Rome as a kingdom, but now we're going to have this king. And the king shall do according to his will. So that's obviously the king of this power that's just been described. And we know in 2 Thessalonians, it's Paul is really quoting this in respect to the papacy. And we know that the power that has to be taken out of the way is going to be pagan Rome, right? So paganism has to be removed. The daily has to be removed for the man of sin to be set up. Abomination of desolation. And so then it's going to describe this, and it's going to talk about that he's going to prosper till the indignation be accomplished. So the indignation is, you can say the indignation is the 2520 as a whole, right? That is the 2520 that is for northern Israel, right? Not the 2520 for Judah. And then we looked at the word determined. For that is determined shall be done. Now, the word determined means to divide something or to cut it off. And we looked at Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, where it talks about 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. It's a different word, but it has the same meaning, right? So it's a synonym. It's or not. Yeah, a synonym. They mean the same thing. They're just a different word. We have lots of synonyms. Okay. And then, yeah, so we looked at that, and we looked at, so the idea is that this is talking, in a sense, we can say that Daniel chapter 11 is addressing the 2520 in the context of the 70 weeks and the 2300 days, right? Because it's going to be addressing the 2520 in Daniel chapter 12 for sure, with the 1260 of which the scattering of the power of the holy people occurs, and then the 1290 and the 1335 that are going to both begin in 508. So definitely the 2020 is the topic of Daniel chapter 11, because he already understands the 70 weeks, and he already understands the 2300 days. And so he's being shown the 2520. He's being shown an expansion, I guess, of the daily and the abomination of desolation. Now there's probably a lot more in these verses, but it describes the papacy. And then when we get to verse 39, which we had just looked at the beginning.
You also understand it.
Yep.
Does he also understand the 1260 with the indignation last second 1260?
No. See, so he doesn't understand that yet, right? In Daniel chapter 11, now in Daniel chapter 7, he's gonna know about the times and a half for the papacy. So he's gonna know about the 1260, but he doesn't have a place to put it, right? So
yeah,
because he's given an understanding of the 70 weeks and the 2300 days, because even when he first studies the 2300 days, he doesn't understand it, right?
yeah.
So the 70 weeks is going to give him the starting point, and so now he's going to know the 2300 days. But what he doesn't know yet is the 7 times of Leviticus 26. He doesn't know the 2 indignations, the 2 desolating powers. He doesn't know the periods of time there yet. And so that's what's going to be shown, is the connection between the daily and the abomination of desolation that we've talked about in chapter 8. So he's going to be given light on that aspect of chapter 8, because he understands the vision, right? And he understands the matter, but does he understand the chazon?
Not quite yet, I would think.
No, not quite yet, right? So,
Yeah.
So that's what chapter 10, 11, and 12 are really addressing. They're addressing the 2520. Okay, does that make sense? And the 2520 in its 2 different aspects. That is, the 2520 is the 2 1260s, and that he doesn't have an understanding of. So he doesn't really have an understanding of the time of the end, right? He doesn't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, and so that's what's going to be shown to him in these passages. It's going to be mentioned in Daniel chapter 8, verse 19. But it's not for, and it's going to talk about the last end of the indignation, right? In chapter 8, verse 19, right, where it says, I will make thee know what shall be at the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be, right? And so he's going to describe Rome, right, coming in and destroying the Prince of Princes, right, standing up against the Prince of Princes. And then it's going to talk about the evening and the morning, which was told is true. Therefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. But he says, I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. So in chapter 9, he's then going to be given, because he wants to know the end of the 70 years. And then he's going to be given the prophecy of the 70 weeks, the matter, the decrees. So he's going to know the beginning of what happens, the 70 weeks, the 490 years. And he's going to be told at the end of that, the city and the sanctuary are going to be destroyed after the Messiah who comes is going to be cut off. So now he has understanding of the matter, the 70 weeks in chapter 10, and he has understanding of the vision, right? He understood the matter, the Debar, and he has understanding of the vision, the Mara. So that's when he's going to pray, and that's when he's going to be given Daniel chapter 11. So it's going to go through and address the daily, that is, these pagan powers, right? And how they lead to the papacy. Okay. So when we get to this verse 39, the one before verse 40, thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many and shall divide the land for gain. Now, when we look at this in Swearingen, and that's basically what we have in our notes, because this is just Swearingen's outline of the historical application. So it's his paraphrase or interlinear or whatever you want to call it. He's putting in the historical application of these verses. And so we've changed some of them up to verse 36. But when you go from 37 to 39, we haven't addressed his interpretation of these verses. And I'm not sure that I agree with his interpretation. So going back to 37, neither shall he, papal Rome, regard the God of his fathers, the true God, nor the desire of woman, that's referring to the celibacy of the Catholic clergy, and I would agree with that, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. And I'm just going to get rid of the extra space there. So he shall magnify himself above all. Now, the papal claim to equality with God. Now, when does that occur? I mean, we don't have papal infallibility as a official doctrine until July 1870, right?
Interesting date,
Yeah,
July 18th.
July 1870 is when papal infallibility occurs, but he is magnifying himself above all that is called God, or all that above all, right? In all that is called God, or whatever, in Second Thessalonians. But this happened during the 1260. But obviously, we don't get that official doctrine of papal infallibility until July 1870. So, which, yeah, is an interesting date. And we do have that connected in our lines in Daniel chapter 11. So we can go back to that date and count. I think we have it here. Just hang on. We have it here in these notes? No, I think I just have it in a chart. So I don't have it in the footnotes. Okay. I'll have to find that. Yeah, so I know we can count from July 1870 to June 27th, 2019, 54,400 days. That's the tribe of Issachar. I think that's when I first noticed that date when we were addressing that. But we also had it in our more recent lines. Yeah, so that was, if we took Daniel 11, verse 16, the Levitical sum is 47,903 inclusive days. And that's the number of days from July 18, 1870 to September 11th, 2001. I'll just show you this so you can see it. So we definitely can take that date and connect it. So, and remember, it's he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Now, this is pagan Rome, right? So we can see that that verse, Daniel 11, verse 16, gives us this connection to this July 18, 1870 date to September 11th, 2001, just by taking the Levitical numbers, right? Not Levitical, lexical numbers, the lexical sum, that is all of the Hebrew numbers added together, gives us 47,903 days. Okay, so we had looked at that before. So now when we address this, even though it doesn't talk about papal infallibility, per se, and he talks about papal claim to equality with God, I still think that we can relate that. So it's going to be something later. It's not during the 1260 that they get that claim of papal infallibility, but definitely the idea that the Pope is in the place of God is there. Now, so the next part, but in his estate he shall honor the God of forces or fortresses, this military power. So of course that's the power of the state, right? So the Pope isn't just a religious power, it's a political power. That's the main idea there, right? We would agree with that?
Yeah, pretty good.
So I want to word this differently than what he has. So I'm just going to take this verse or this part, he shall magnify himself above all. This is I can't think of the word that I want to use, but it's religious. It's a religious claim, right? It's we'll just say religious authority, but it's more than just ultimate religious authority. There's some better word than that. Oh, that's badly spelled.
The ultimate looks good addition for there.
I was thinking of a better word than ultimate, but I just can't think of it. And then maybe universal religious authority. I think I like better.
Supreme religious authority.
Yeah, supreme. That's maybe good. If I spell it right. And then when it comes to this is referring to the state authority, power over the state, or state authority. There's probably some better phrase I could use. Now, then when it says, and a God whom his fathers knew not, shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones and pleasant things. Now, he's going to put the Virgin Mary in here. And I'm not sure that I would. Why does he have the Virgin Mary here? Is that really what this is about?
Well, Mary would be secondary to the Pope.
Well, yeah, but I just think a God whom his fathers knew not. So he's just taking this more in this literal sense of, okay, nobody worshiped the Virgin Mary before, right? So this is this new God. And he's taking this in a very literal sense, the gold, the silver, the precious stones, the pleasant things. And then says that thus shall he do in the most strongholds. He just puts there that's Christendom with a strange God. Now, I'm not sure if I would use strongholds to describe Christendom.
Stronghold seems more of a military or
Yeah,
state like that.
yeah. So this is a castle or fortification, like a defender, a fortress, and it's two words actually. The most strongholds is two words: 4013, which is a fortification or castle, but it's also connected with the word ma'az, that is a fortified place. So like a fortress, right? And then now, of course, strange God is foreign God. So the gods of heathenism. And now, I mean, in a loose sense, or in a partial sense, maybe, you could say that Mary's a part of that. But I think this is just much more addressing the idea of paganism in general, right? They're just basically saying that the papacy is a pagan religion dressed up as Christianity, and maybe Mary can symbolize that. But I don't think I would just put her, there in, that's what this is describing directly, the Virgin Mary. And maybe I'm not Catholic enough to understand it. Maybe Catholics would argue with me. They'd say the religion is about Mary. But I think that's actually a bit more of a modern thing. I mean, obviously Mary's always been there, but the cult of Mary is definitely popular among evangelical Catholics, because I know a number of evangelical Catholics, and a lot of things are about Mary. I don't know if it was that huge in the past. It just seems to be more of a modern thing, even though Mary's always been there. Okay, but anyway, but I would think that this is also about the military as well, because he's going to honor the god of forces or fortresses. Now, and it says and a god, but in Hebrew they just have a consecutive vav. It's just that's how they put their sentences together. So it doesn't mean it's something in addition to. They could put, and that is a God whom their fathers knew not, shall he honor. So obviously this is paganism. And if we look at the different things, we have gold, of course, we know, and silver, precious stones. So obviously that's going to be yakar, which means valuable things, and then pleasant things, 2530, the things that we can delight in, right? Beautiful things. So, I mean, this to me would describe the whole of the Catholic religious system, right? I mean, if you think about the Catholic Church, it's cathedrals and its buildings, all of its idols, it's all meant for beauty, right? So that it's dressing up this oppressive power in all of these symbols that, you know, are symbols of God's goodness and wealth and beauty. Now, what about in his estate? Now, this word estate, but in his estate he shall honor the god of forces or fortresses. Now, the word honor, of course, it means literally to be heavy, and it can be used in a bad sense, burdensome, severe, dull. In a good sense, numerous, rich, and honorable. So the word actually has two almost opposite meanings. And the estate, it just means to stand, that is a pedestal or station, a base, a foot, an office, a place. So if we're looking at the papacy, this power, this king that shall do according to his will, he's exalting himself above every god and speaks marvelous things. The word marvelous, a great, difficult, wonderful, you know, so, you know, obviously it's applied sort of in a negative sense. It's more like something that's hidden, hard, hidden, things too high. So he's not speaking good things against God. He's speaking marvelous things against God, the God of gods, which is God. And he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, right? And neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of woman, nor any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. This is why some people would say this is France. But we can see he's not, you know, the papacy is not really honoring any God, right? Because he's above all, right? So he's magnifying himself above God. But then it says, but in his estate, in his pedestal, in his base, he shall honor the God of fortresses or forces, right? Right. So technically it's a fortress, a fortified place. And so when it says in his estate, whose estate is it referring to? Is it the Pope's estate or God's estate? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yes.
Okay. So in whose estate is it? Is it saying in the Pope's estate he shall honor the God? Or is it saying in the estate or the place or the base where God should be honored, that instead this other God is honored? Now, and I wonder why they put this one as a capital G in Daniel 11 verse 38. Here, I'm just going to here so you can see this better. So in his estate he shall honor the God of forces or fortresses. So they put this as a capital G. I don't think I would have if I was translating this. Right? He shall not regard the God of his fathers. That would be God, right? Right? The God of gods, that would be God. But in his estate he shall honor the God of fortresses. That doesn't make sense that that's a capital G. Any comment on this? How could we show what this verse is talking about?
I sort of take the word estate as being Rome's estate, and maybe, yeah, but I could be wrong. I just assumed that.
Yeah, me too. Right. So that's the way that I always kind of looked at it. I looked at the word estate and I just, so that's one way of looking at it, that in the place of Rome, but I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, definitely
But
you would agree that God should not be capitalized there, that the God of fortresses.
with my
is-
Bible, it's no capital.
Okay. Okay. Can you explain that a bit more?
I'm saying it's not in capital.
It's not in capital in yours, or it shouldn't be?
Yes, yes. 38 is not in capital.
Okay. So so here it says it's a capital in the eSword. So what do you have where it's not a capital?
I'm using a KJV.
Okay. So just a printed Bible?
This is the one which has got the concordance, the what? The commentary for Daniel and Revelations.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because I wouldn't put a capital. So I'm not sure why it's capital here. I don't know if that's like a typo on eSword, or if it's just
It's not
it's not. So in the King James, it does have a capital G.
in the 1769 King James, it is a capital G.
Okay.
Now, the alternate reading of this verse would have this as being, but in his stead he shall honor the God of munitions, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, and with precious stones and things desired.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
Yeah. Munitions. I don't. I would think fortresses makes more sense because it's actually. I mean, you could say it is fortifications. That's the idea of the word ma'oz. Now it's from 810, which means a fortified place. And I do think that I've seen other places where they talk about fortresses, the god of fortresses. But they say here a place or means of safety, protection, refuge, stronghold. Right, it's often translated as stronghold. You're going to see it here in the most strongholds in Daniel 11, verse 39. So it's going to be translated as strongholds. Definitely forces doesn't make any sense. But also, and I'm not sure why they put a capital G there.
well,
So I think they're interpreting this verse a bit differently.
they're also using Isaiah 44:9 as one of their references to this with pleasant things.
Yeah. Yeah, just because of the word delectable things in that verse. They that make a graven image are all of them vanity, and their delectable things shall not profit. And they are their own witness. Yeah, so I mean, this definitely is referring to the idolatry of the papacy, right?
Correct.
And to me, this is describing. I mean, can you consider their cathedrals and churches and so forth to be kind of a type of fortress?
They can be.
Yeah, and their monasteries and all their different buildings. And that's the way that I think that I understand that in his estate, that is in God's estate, they're going to honor all of these churches, these buildings, and everything with all their idolatry attached to it. So I wouldn't put this as specifically this as dealing with Mary. To me, this is just the whole religious system that is put in the place of God. That's the way that I would interpret this verse. All of their idolatry, all of their show is all in his estate. So I take his as being God's estate. Shall he honor, that is the papacy, honor the God of fortresses, which is not a God whom his, the fathers knew, right? He's going to honor them with all this idolatry. And he shall do in the most strongholds. So if we're going to take the most strongholds, I mean, this is going to be where the papacy is operating from, right?
Well, here again, the alternate Hebrew would call that the fortresses of munitions.
Right. I know that they keep using munitions there, but I don't think munitions is a good translation of the Hebrew, right?
All
So
I'm doing is
yeah, I
pointing
know.
out
Yeah.
King James.
Yeah, the translators give that option. Okay, so this would be referring to me the most strongholds. Wouldn't this be the Vatican? Wouldn't this be where the Pope is operating from? This shall he do in the most strongholds. And if we look at, I just want to look at the Hebrew spelling here. Yeah, so I thought so. So it shouldn't be translated as in the most strongholds. It has a lamed at the beginning, not a bet. And so this would be more, well, the context here would be more to like from the most strongholds or to the most strongholds, in the sense that that is where he is doing this from, not in it, but from it. Okay. And we can see here Mibstar and Maaz. And then we're going to have, yeah. And the strange gods. Okay.
Stronghold, can it not be the military strength? Because maybe that's where he's getting the power from.
Okay. So, and see, that's where I think I understand. But if we look at the progression here, so if we go back to what was being talked about, yeah, because to me it's more a fortress or a fortification from a spiritual sense, because these are going to be places that are going to be places of idolatry, right? And
Okay.
but yet they still have this sort of, the Catholic Church is still a state, right? It's not just a religion. So so we had earlier, right? It's going to be the supreme religious authority is going to be pointed out, as well as the power over the state. So maybe I could even put supreme civil authority. I'm going to do that just so we can see. Right, so it has power. Boy, terrible typing. Okay, so it has supreme civil authority. So those are the two characteristics that are being described. And now it's going to, so that's, he honors the God of forces or fortresses, right? Now he's going to do that, and I don't want Virgin Mary. So just this power, this civil authority, he's going to honor with gold, silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. So I'm just saying that these fortresses, let me cross this out because I don't like that word there. That's what I prefer, but I'm going to put it in italics just to show it half. How's that? A God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. So that's the God, and I'm going to change this. I don't know. I'm going to cross that out too because I don't like that. Just doesn't like a repeated word. Okay, so the God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers knew not, shall he honor with gold, silver, precious stones. So to me, this is about so we have civil authority there, we have religious authority, but it's going to be expressed from a church. That is, the papacy doesn't set up the world government. It controls the world government through its religion, right? That's what it does. I mean, they have the Vatican, so they kind of have a government. But the idea of the papacy is it's supposed to sit above the governments of the world because of its religious authority that gives us its civil authority. And that it does this from these churches, these fortresses, and it's going to honor these things with all of these beautiful items, these valuable items. Through this idolatrous worship. Okay. And then he shall do in the most strongholds. So to say that it's his Christendom, I would just say from the Vatican. I guess I should put a capital on that. So again, I'm not going to put the Virgin Mary in there. So this is a strange God or foreign God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. Okay, so what about acknowledge and increase? What is this referring to? Okay, this word acknowledge, it means properly to scrutinize, to know, respect, discern, regard. To disguise. And this word increase means to bring into abundance. So is this what the Catholic Church does with its strange God? Does it disguise it and cause it to increase? And it does this from the Vatican. From its place of its fortress, I wonder how the best way to translate that, because there's two different words. I think what they're doing is they're taking two different words, like that most strongholds. I don't know if that's a very good translation, because they're both dealing with a fortified fortification or fortified fortress. So they're just using it as an intensive. Usually use the same word, but they are related words to some degree. Okay. So is that what the Catholic Church does? Does it disguise its worship as Christian and cause it to increase with glory?
It seems that way.
And then when it says, and he shall cause them to rule over many and shall divide the land for gain, who's the them? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Would it be like the nations around? Kingdoms?
Okay. Well, could it be the them referring to these false gods? So it could be that this is referring to this king, right? This man of sin. That he is going to cause them, that is, these false gods that he worships to rule over many. So we could say that them is the false gods. He is the papacy. And then the many, I would say, would be the many different churches, right? Christendom. I would agree with that part. Wouldn't agree with the Mary and the saints, right? That's what he has. I mean, you could say Mary and the saints, but I'll just say false gods. Okay. So he, the papacy. I mean, that's the way that I would do it, just at first glance. Right, so you got all of Christendom, they are worshiping these false gods because of the papal power. Okay, and then we just got this last little bit that we started with. So him dividing the land for gain. Yeah, so here Swearingen's going to put it, the territories divided into dioceses, or whatever, however you say that, for economic gain. I mean, you could probably put that there. I think it's a bit more than that.
How does the Hebrew actually read?
Well, it just says to divide the land for gain. That's what it says. That word divide, we looked at it, it was dividing the land for Lot. So we looked at Joshua and in Numbers, where it talks about the dividing of the land. So this is a counterfeit of it. But I don't think this is really just about dioceses. I think it is about the various nations. That the papacy definitely has a part to play in the division of Europe. But you know exactly what this symbolizes, especially once we get to the present truth application. And that's what I'm always keeping in the back of my mind. That's why I don't like Mary in there. It's just too specific of a thing where this is more general.
Here again, the 1769, instead of gain, would have the alternate Hebrew saying a price.
Yeah, well, I guess you could use that. I mean, but the idea here is, is really the same idea, right? That is for a price because it's about a profit, right? So,
But you also got your Hebrew word of 4242.
right, yeah, which means price, higher reward, gain, right? So there's nothing wrong with price. It's just, it's not just that they're just dividing the land for price. This is for profit. That's the idea. So that's why I think used gain.
Is there a symbolism of 4242, a type of doubling?
Yes, there is. And what's the 42 represent?
I've always looked at it as 6 times 7.
Okay.
42.
1260s, two 1260s, right?
Which is 12520.
Yeah. Okay. So we need to keep
So,
that. And the dividing, so that's going to, okay, Stephen, you said something?
yes, so the dividing of the land for gain,
Mhm.
you mentioned there, Origin mentions diocese, but there was times, and just came to my mind as an example, you have the Normans take England, and the Pope then made him, or sort of said, we want you to rule over the Irish, because the Irish weren't really supportive of the Pope. And
Okay.
so that he promoted the English king as being like the Lord of Ireland as well. He
Yeah.
supported that aspect, so that the Irish would then be subjugated under the English Pope, and sort of and therefore under the English king, and therefore as a consequence under the Pope.
Yeah, that's
So-
more what I was thinking. Not so much I wasn't thinking of Ireland specifically. I mean, you think of that because you're on.
No, well, that's just an example. There would probably be other nations
Right.
where
So
he sort of he promotes people who will then honor him and get benefit from it.
right. So yeah, so he is setting up kings and taking down kings in a sense in the place of God. So he's doing something that God is actually ultimately doing, but the Pope is trying to exercise that power. Right? Is that how you?
So you could even you could also apply it to like the Albigenses and the Cathars.
Mhm.
That there was maybe a king there in France direction who was supportive of the Pope, who the Pope said, well, these here Cathar towns, whatever these areas, we want you, we'll give you this here land, just go in and wipe out this here people who are not supportive of me.
Okay. Okay. And then Iran, you made a comment which I don't understand in of dealing about the capital and colon. What is that referring to?
In that verse, same word was capitalized and not capitalized, depending on where it was.
Oh, you're talking about the word God?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same word in Hebrew. So 433. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is pretty significant. We can take these 2 periods of 42 months, and I'm just going to make a footnote of that before I forget. I'm just going to put it on here. And that's also referring to the week of Christ if we think about it on the 1863 chart. Okay. So a lot of things that we notice here as we go through these verses. Obviously, we're going to go through some of this again when we draw it on a line, and then when we do a present truth application. And we're not going to look at Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45 yet. So we just worked up to 39, and then we're going to try to get this drawn on a line next week. We'll see what we can get done. Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Let's close with prayer. The dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the time that we've had this morning and for the things that you teach us. And we ask that we can submit our lives to you, that we can think about these things until we meet again. We pray for each person who is looking into these truths. Help us to understand your word. We ask for your care and protection. May your angels watch over our family and friends, and may we represent you. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.